Hey there, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. Welcome. It's December, which means there's cyber deals, there's end of year deals, there's stuff around. And also I have affiliate links below if you want to support the channel and you like something you see, I get a kickback. And there's also a Patreon if you want to support me and are feeling extra generous this Christmas. But where I'm going with this is, it's the end of the year, there's deals on, and also my computer, my Mac Pro Trashcan 2013, it is just, the arteries are hardening, it's getting old and just not very capable anymore. And so I've really had to pare down the plugins that I use so as not to overload it and just bring it to an early grave. So I've thought about 10 plugins that I find myself using more than any other so that I can get great results, not overload my computer. And I want to lay out those 10 plugins, those 10 tools for you now that are mostly, by the way, in the realm of mixing and mastering and repair, not so much composing and producing music. So here's 10 amazing plugins that, even though my computer might kind of insta-die if I were to open all these at once, I still need them and rely on them all the time. Number 1, RX 10. Now, if you're surprised that I'm bringing up an iZotope tool, you shouldn't be. I know the tools very well. I happen to work for the company that makes it. And as such, I've really grown to know and appreciate this thing. I'm also really aware of a lot of the competitors out there. I think Waves has like a Clarity plugin that they use for denoising. There's obviously RipX that are doing some cool stuff with source separation. I think the criticisms that the noise reduction or source separation stuff is maybe not as robust in RX, I think that criticism is valid, but there's also nothing quite like RX in terms of a 360 soup to nuts, any problem in the audio you can go in there and fix. Workflow, and that's why I love RX and will continue to use it. If I'm mastering, if I'm mixing, if I'm about to mix or about to master, I always put something I'm working on in RX, pull it up in the spectrogram, and then I have 48 or maybe 50, or I don't know what the number of modules is, tools to use to treat literally any audio problem, from maybe left and right channel alignment. There's volume discrepancies. I can look at waveform statistics. I can source separate with music rebalance. I can use the assistant. I can go in and use dialogue isolate, dialogue de-reverb. I can use all kinds of tools, even to fix wow flutter. There really isn't anything like it for those who really want to go in and dissect and repair and restore audio. And so that is why I will probably never be able to give up this tool. And certainly as more people went home over the last 2+ years and did their music production from there and everything, we got less than studio quality results and things that needed to be fixed. And like I said, a lot of competitors out there, but nothing really lets you get in between the molecules of the sound like RX and solve them. So for me, RX is amazing. It'll always be amazing. It's also great as a tool if you're a producer or whatever and you know how to fix stuff because you understand RX and you know how to do it manually too. I think it might lead to you working on projects and stuff for other people. So it's also just like a good language to learn in terms of audio production, if that makes sense. Now, the second tool is maybe less familiar to this crowd, but it's one that I've really fallen in love with, and it's called RC20. I think it's called Retro Color. That's the RC, and it's by XLN Audio, and they make a bunch of other tools and some, I think, drum sample replacement technology. It's really this kind of instant lo-fi maker that you just put on your track, and it makes anything sound dirty, dusty, croaky, old, vintage very, very quickly. And how I came onto this tool was I was asked to mix something, a really complex session, and I was asked to mix it using only, I'm not going to name the company, only Company X's plugins, okay? And so this meant that I had to take off all the stuff that was already on the mix and replace it with Company X's plugins. And some of the plugins I was able to replace with Company X's. You know, I was able to get a pretty good EQ ballpark sound when I got rid of the EQ that the band had put on that session and used Company X's. But wherever the band had RC20, and that's where I first saw this thing, I was never able to use Company X's delay and kind of lo-fi and stuff like that. I could never get the same sound that RC20 gave me. And to me, that's like the testament of how unique a plugin is, where if you were to assemble a bunch of stock plugins and try to get the sound of RC20 with those stock plugins, if you could, then yeah, that kind of obviates the need for such a unique little RC20 tool. But I really couldn't, after trying to bring delays and bit crushers and all the stuff to make it sound lo-fi. I could not get the RC20 sound. And so since then, I've come to really love it and use it and appreciate how quirky and interesting that it is. I think you can get it from a couple different sources. It's never that expensive, to be honest. And it's one of those plugins that I had to buy based on my experience. And I think you should at least give it a whirl, give it a spin and check it out. So that's number 2. Now, number 3 is not so much a plugin, but a module within a plugin called Neutron. And the module, is called Sculptor. I think people sleep on this thing for reasons I don't fully understand. If you've watched my mix tutorials, you'll notice that I've used Sculptor a lot, especially for guitars and stuff. Sculptor is using this kind of in vogue spectral shaping technology, not so much to attenuate or boost stuff or kind of, control stuff, but what it is it's predicated on a target system. So using some machine learning, a bunch of guitars have been analyzed, and then baked into a little profile behind Sculptor is the guitar setting. So you bring your guitar in, you choose the guitar setting in Sculptor, and then what it does is it molds and melds your guitar track to fit the ideal spectral, EQ, tonal, and dynamic target of a great sounding guitar. Or if you're working on pianos, you click the piano one and you bring your piano in, and then you can kind of drag a slider and just kind of mold your source to meet the ideal target of, whatever instrument that it is you're working on. And this to me has always been, I was a little worried about it at first. It's pretty CPU hungry, but it's EQ and compression in one. I honestly can't say that I've had terrible results with it, and it always just gets me where I need to go really quickly, and again obviates the need for an individual EQ and an individual compressor, because it's those two things in one. Spectral shaping is like an army of multiband compressors spaced out and just gently using low ratio compression to smooth and shape and sculpt, if you will, your sound. So the one in, I think we're on Neutron 4 right now, is just, it's great. And again, if you've seen my tutorials, I'll always pull it out and be like, acoustic guitar, electric guitar. I'll just find the target that matches what I'm working on and then just blend between. And it's just a super flexible tool that not a lot of people are using. So maybe it'll kind of give you a bit of an edge. I don't know. But that's another amazing tool that I find myself using a lot. The 4th tool is one that you probably see me talk about on the channel. It's by, I think, Waves Factory, and it's called Spectre. It's a clever little EQ and saturation tool built into one. So like any parametric EQ, you can raise or cut or whatever. In this situation with Spectre, you can boost a certain area. Let's say you want to bring up 200 cycles by 3 dB. But in the area that you've boosted, you can actually apply saturation. And that's the whole point, is that they've married the saturation EQ workflow together with a familiar UI, so you're still boosting and things like that. And you can also choose between different flavors and algorithms of saturation, all of which sound very, very, very strong and good. And if you're into mastering or you're just worried about quality, there's oversampling to protect against, aliasing, distortion, and things like that. So I found that Spectre is, again, one of those little tools that, especially on vocals, if I bring up a little bit at 2K and add some, I forget which saturation algorithm, it just helps the singer step forward a little bit in a non-intrusive and very, I think, musical way. That sounds kind of weird, but this is how you think when you're a mix engineer, is weird words and language like that. So if you haven't checked out Spectre, I'd give it a whirl. A lot by the company, which I hope I'm getting right, Waves Factory, is excellent. So I check them out. Now, the 5th tool I haven't really featured on the channel, and I am going to make a Why Is Everyone Obsessed with it, because I certainly am. and it's Melodyne, no surprise, by Celemony. So Melodyne is definitely not new in terms of like, you know, people doing pitch correction and things like that. They were one of the first. It's very crowded now, and you've got Antares, I think I'm pronouncing that right. You've now got Synchro Arts getting into it. There's a stock tuning tool in Logic. It's everywhere, but Melodyne were one of the first to kind of use the whole blob UI workflow, and their application, the Melodyne kind of mothership, the editor version, which is what I have, I believe, it's now included things like very simple macros, not to tune, but to correct amplitude adjustments. So if you want to have your compressor work less hard, you can select your entire bass line or piano or vocal. People think about it for vocals, and then just smooth everything out so that it hits roughly the same average level. And this replaces the need for manual editing with your mouse or heavy compression. The compressor in your session, after you've done your automation work, your macro work with that leveler, your compressor works less hard in the mix because you've leveled things and things sound good. So you can use compression more for tone and color. So Melodyne has just become this really amazing tool, a little bit like RX, even though RX doesn't really do tuning that much. It's become like that, but for tuning for me. And there's all kinds of great tutorials out there. I've called them out before, showing you how you can get even more musical, natural results by splitting blobs instead of kind of tuning the entire blob, and cutting things up by passage and syllable and things like that. So it is easy to get great results, but it's also very deep if you want to go a step further and really explore the tool for correcting pretty much anything. So Melodyne 5, I think we're on the 5th edition now, is to me one of those indispensable tools that I think has yet to be eclipsed by a competitor in a meaningful way. That's just my feeling, and that's why it's number 5. Now, the 6th slot here isn't so much a tool, but it's kind of a company. So I don't love emulations of things. There's a lot of great ones floating around, but for me, Universal Audio Digital, UAD, I think that's what it stands for. Pretty much anything by them is usually very, very, very good. And you'll see when I'm doing my why is everyone obsessed with this or whatever, I'll go for the SSL G-Bus compressor that UAD make because it looks good. It usually sounds as close to the real thing as possible. And also it's blessed by the original manufacturer, in this case, SSL. All their tools are kind of blessed and endorsed by the people that made them. I see a lot of companies that they'll do their version of an API or whatever, but UA is one of the only ones that kind of has the official endorsement and blessing of that company. So it makes sense to me to be oh, well, if I want the clone plugin version of that analog gear, I'll go for the UA one. And I found that over the years, UA has relaxed a little bit its pricing and gotten a bit friendlier. So there's more half off, more 40% off more often across the year. A lot of companies, they'll usually do one big sale and everyone looks forward to it and they kind of wait or whatever. With UA, I feel like they've been getting a little bit more kind of liberal with how often they put things on sale. And now certainly with M1 Max and things like that, the idea that you have to have a piece of hardware from them, it's not really that important anymore because they can run on your computer in a pretty zippy way if they have the kind of, non-hardware tied plugin version of the tool that you happen to want. So I just think that for now, they make some really incredible emulations, and I'm always interested in their marketing and their tools. So for me, pretty much anything by UA, if you can, scrape up the cash, you're probably going to be pretty happy with. Number 7 on my list is this really great bus compressor by Plugin Alliance, Brainworks, or whatever. It's called the Townhouse Compressor. And it's this little bus compressor that I think is supposed to be modeled off the tool I just talked about, the SSL G-Bus series. But it isn't quite exactly that sonically. I always put this thing on drums. I don't know, it just sounds great, and it's what I always use for my drum bus, parallel compressor, but you can use it wherever you want. You can stick it on the master. It just does a really, really great job, and like I said, I'm not a big fan of the whole skeuomorphic, screws, and you see the rack kind of holes and whatever. I like kind of futuristic tools, but this is one of those things where I ended up using it a couple times because it popped up in some ads, and I downloaded it, and it really just sounds solid and wonderful. So a lot of other stuff that Plugin Alliance Brainworks make is, I'm sure, great too. I haven't really scratched the surface. They have a big catalog, but that plugin is it's awesome, and it's kind of become my go-to bus compressor. Number 8 for me is pretty new on this list, and it is RipX by the company Hit and Mix. I mentioned earlier about the RX platform being really good for a lot of stuff, and it is. I think, though, there are some really amazing results for source separation coming out of RipX, and not just, the source separation, but they're able to identify, just guitar, or in some cases a saxophone, and isolate that with pretty incredible results too. Now, I reviewed their Deep Create platform, which, it's a long video. I'll cut to the chase. I liked it. The UI, I think, needs a bit of work. It is kind of a flag planty thing of we want to be the first people to make a DAW and source separation thing. So obviously the UI is going to get iterated upon and will get better and better, but the underlying source separation technology is spectacular. And I think for that reason, if I'm asked to separate anything, I'm probably definitely going to be thinking about RipX before I, go anywhere else, because right now it is, one of the best out there for sure. So if you haven't heard about them or whatever, RipX, they make Deep Create, Deep Remix, Deep Audio, I think, as well. I'm a little fuzzy on all their offerings, but just head to their website, Hit and Mix or RipX, and you'll find them. Coming in at number 9 is another little secret weapon tool that I don't see a lot of people using. I've used it on the channel. It's by a company called Overloud, and it's their Gem Dopamine plugin. And what this thing does is just adds high end without harshness. It just helps things cut through in a really incredible, simple, easy way. I think it's modeled after this old Dolby machine. I'm not like people always comment, they're like, it's actually I don't covet old gear, so I don't know, sorry, but it just brightens things up in a very pleasing way, in a way that I think other tools like a Moog EQ or whatever, they brighten things up, but they bring other things up with them. This thing has a silky top end to it, which is really, really impressive. And I've used it a lot, especially on vocals. And I think in one case I used it on a mix bus just to poke things out a little bit up and around 16K. And it was wonderful. So it's one of those little things. If someone ever asks you to make something brighter and you're kind of worried about it, I think if you stick Overloud on there and just go with one of the two settings, you're going to be good to go. You're going to be sounding silky and high and all that stuff. So that would be number 9. So number 10 is also no surprise, but it's Soothe by OX Sound. So Soothe is a dynamic resonance suppressor. All it does is use its algorithm to look for dynamic resonant energy. And with one big potentiometer, one big knob in the middle, you can just get all that out and just knock it out. And what it'll do is it's dynamic. So it's going to follow those frequencies around as the performance changes. So it's really easy to just kind of bring something in that was recorded harshly. It doesn't belong on every, piece of audio, especially if it was well recorded. But if it wasn't, and you've got some comb filtering or some accentuation of high end or low end or kind of wonkiness or something like that, it's just able to find it really quickly and dip it down, and then dip it down dynamically and follow it throughout the performance. So I'm not breaking any news by putting Soothe on a top 10 list, but it's just really, really great. And if you don't know about it, I'd be surprised. But if you don't, just go and Google it and you'll find a bunch of people singing its praises, I'm sure. So that's my little top 10. I would kill my computer with these plugins because I need them and I use them so much. I'm curious if there's anything you thought would be on this list that's not. Is there anything that surprises you? Is there anything that you think would go on your top 10 list? I definitely want to know. As ever, there's a affiliate links if you feel like, getting anything. I get a kickback and I appreciate it. There's the Patreon too to support me. As ever, like and subscribe. I just have to do all this PSA stuff because a lot of the views that I get come from people who aren't subscribed. So it would mean a lot to me if you were. So I think we'll leave it there. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.